A very good morning to all. In today's session, we are all going to learn what is all about the allocative efficiency under perfect competition and the efficiency of the market mechanism. So let's begin with the efficiency. So this is the meaning of the efficiency. Pareto efficiency is one of the type of economic concepts which always describe a situation where all the resources are distributed in the most efficient way and can be used effectively, and in fact there is no improvements can be made without making someone to take a disadvantage of it. That is called Pareto optimality, in other words. When it talks about the history of this concept, the efficiency, which the name called Pareto efficiency is one of the named after Wilfredo Pareto, which is who is an Italian economist, sociologist, and a philosopher. And of course, it is a key concept of the welfare economics. In this particular concept, it is also denoted that whatever the resources are available, whether it is called an optimum resources, which will be distributed in the most efficient way where no improvement can be made without making someone to take disadvantage of it. That is actually called efficiency. In other words, it is also called the Pareto optimality or the Pareto efficiency. This concept is mainly developed by Wilfredo Pareto, who is an Italian economist, philosopher, and of course, it is a well-known of welfare economics. Let's take an example, the sale of a used car. So in this particular example, the seller has a value of, let's say, 10 lakh rupees, and the buyer is willing to pay a 15 lakhs for it. But the ultimately efficiency is called where the benefit is for both of the sides. That is the benefit, the amount will be decided is benefit for the buyer also, is benefit for the seller also, and the exact efficient amount is being decided, that is 12 lakh 50,000 would be a Pareto efficiency of this particular deal, where both the parties, whether the sellers and the buyers, are the better off as a result of the trade. And that is called the Pareto efficiency, where both the parties and the buyer or the seller would get an advantage of any trade, and that's called the Pareto efficiency. Let's talk about the another concept, that is the productive efficiency. So when we talk about productive efficiency, it is also known as the production efficiency, which is also another type of economic concept, where this particular concept states that whatever the available resources in the economy, it produce, this concept will show up or reveals the largest possible output from the available resources in an economy. So once the company or any of the market reaches that, you can see the maximum point, or you can say in other words a productive efficiency, that would be the maximum point. So any of the additional units would require, or to produce an additional unit, it requires to reduce the production level of the another good. That, in other words, we can call that to gain an additional unit of one good, it means to reduce the another unit of earlier good, and that is called productive efficiency. To reach out the maximum level of output, the particular seller has to deal with to reduce an additional unit to gain a more units of another good, and that is actually called the productive efficiency. The productive efficiencies will come into a decisions relate to the resources allocation when there is a production of an additional units of a good. That means it always increase the opportunity cost in the another market. If in the one market the economic efficiency or the productive efficiency has been increased. That means there is a higher opportunity cost in the another market. That means to reach out the maximum output, the other market would deals with to increase an additional unit of one good. That means to reduce the more units of another good. That exactly called the opportunity cost, which comes under the productive efficiency. So look at the diagram over here where the two main goods has been used, that is the quantity of the butter produced and the quantity of guns produced. So look at the production possibility curve, or in other words I could see the production possibility frontier where the all these points, that is B, D and C, where all these points are productively efficient, but at point A that will be shown in the diagram would not be efficient as it unders the underemployment. And when we talk about the point X, this is the most efficient uh, point where the production can be achieved efficiently. So this is all about the production efficiency, where the three main points, that is the B, D, and C, they are production is fully efficient. But when we talk about below the production possibility curve or frontier, which stands under employment, that means the production cannot be achieved efficiently and effectively, whereas the point X can be achieved where the production and the available resources are always available to produce the largest possible output in an economy. So this is all about the production, where to gain an additional units of one good, you have a particular seller has to reduce the units of another good, and that the concept, that the assumption is mainly based under productive efficiency. Let's talk about the next concept, that is the technical efficiency. So the technical efficiency is the effectiveness with a given set of inputs. So whatever the set of inputs has been available in the economy is always used to produce an output, and that exactly called the technical efficiency. A firm or a company is said to be technical efficient if that particular firm or company will produce the maximum output using the minimum inputs such as labor, capital and technology, that actually call the technical efficiency. And in this particular context, it is a precondition of the overall Pareto efficiency, which has been explained earlier with the help of the particular example where both the parties of the trade are better off. They will get an advantage of whatever the trade has been done in the particular market. So that is exactly called the technical efficiency. Now we talk about the another concept, that is the efficiency in output mix. So when we talk about output mix, we always use the concept of Pareto efficiency, where the goods will be produced using the technical efficient allocation of resources which are being most demanded by the consumer. It means, or in other words, if the goods has been more demanded by the consumer, that means the firm or the company will use the all the technical efficiently allocation of resources to produce that particular maximum goods which was demanded by the consumer. It means the exact, if the company will do so, technically the condition will be the marginal rate of substitution of any of the goods like butter and milk, when the marginal rate of substitution of in any of the two goods by which is more demanded by the consumer is equal to the rate of product transformation. So before I come up further, go to upcoming slides, I would like to explain these two main concepts. What is the marginal rate of substitution and the marginal rate of transformation? So when we talk about the marginal rate of substitution, is the amount of one good that a consumer is willing to give up in exchange of another good. For example, if one consumer wants some units of oranges, that means that consumer has to give up another good that is called apple, and that is called the marginal rate substitution. When we talk about the rate of product transformation, or in other words, I could say it is the marginal rate of transformation. It refers to a rate by at which the consumer reduces the amount of one good by sacrificing the additional units of another good, and that is exactly called the rate of product transformation, where some units of one good will be sacrificed to gain or to produce an additional units of another good, which is, in other words, we can use the concept is opportunity cost under this particular rate of production or product transformation, or the marginal rate of transformation, where there are two goods and to gain an additional units of one good to sacrifice the extra units of another good, and that is exactly called the rate of product transformation. So to give an explanation of this particular concept, that is an efficiency and output mix, will be explained through the use of graphically presentation. And when we talk about graphical presentation, it will be explained in the one person economy, which will be applied to many individuals with an identical preferences, which have a same preferences towards the goods. So let's begin. This is an explanation of efficiency of the product mix. So there, in this particular graphical representation, there are three indifference curve, which is namely U1, U2, and U3. So when we talk about the categories of the indifference curve, that is U1 stands for the lower output, U2 it stands for a you can say higher output, and the U3 stands for the highest output. So let's begin with the output. On the x-axis, the output of x has been given, and the y-axis, the output of y has been given. In this particular graphical representation or the diagram which has been shown, it is based on the assumption that the output mix will be shown in a one-man economy which produces the two uh, types of goods, let's say X and Y. And these combination of goods X and Y is produced with the help of production possibility curve, that is PPF and the or the PPC. So any point on the PP curve represents the optimum efficient technical use of allocation of resources. That whatever the point which has been shown, that is point E, which shows an optimum level of output which has been achieved on a higher indifference curve with with the budget which has been given and prescribed and used under by the firm. So the point which is called E, which is always tangent to the higher indifference curve, that is U2. So if we talk about this curve where the E is the equilibrium point and which is tangent to the budget line, which is called the budget line is PP, uh, that shows the higher you can see level of output, and at this particular point the individual marginal rate of substitution of any of the two goods is equal to the marginal rate of transformation, and that is the exact you can see the condition to reach out the efficiency in the particular output mix. So this is the condition where a firm has to achieve at a point E, which is an equilibrium that states that particular reveals that or states that the marginal rate of technical substitution is equal to the marginal rate of transformation or a rate of product transformation, and this is the main condition to reach out the overall efficiency of a one person economy. So in this particular economy, the curve PP stands for the combination, that is production possibility is a combination of two goods, let's say X and Y, which that can be produced. And in this particular curve, it shows that at point E, which where the maximum satisfaction level has been achieved by the consumers or the individuals, and this point the exact precondition of the efficiency in output mix has also been achieved, where the MRS, that means the individual marginal rate of substitution, is equal to the rate of transformation at the marginal rate of transformation. So this is a exact graphical representation of the efficiency in output mix. Output mix means when there are two main goods has been given and how you reach out the maximum level of satisfaction using up the production possibilities curve, or using the concept of the production possibility frontier. So this is a diagram which has been shown over here. So when we talk about the F and G points, F and G points are those points where the more goods has not been demanded and the efficient resources are not being available for to achieve the satisfaction level. Now we talk about the next concept, that is the efficiency in a perfectly competitive market firm. This efficiency has been divided into two categories, where the efficiency has been diagrammatically presented in a perfectly competitive market firm, and in the second case, the concept of efficiency has also been, you can say, graphically represented in a perfectly competitive market economy. So let's talk about the efficiency in a perfectly competitive market firm. In this particular concept, the two main types of efficiencies always being used, where that is called the productive efficiency and the allocative efficiency. So in a perfectly competitive market, the productive efficiency refers to doing things right. So whatever the things being done, being doing it should be right way. But when we talk about the allocative efficiency, it always refers doing the right things. So whatever you do it in a right way, and focus on the right things only. So that stands for allocative efficiency. So whatever the distribution of resources to be done, just done for the right things only, and that is actually called the allocative efficiency. In this particular concept, I could say there is also a few conditions which has to be fulfilled, and where the maximum output can be achieved, where the average revenue is equal to the marginal cost for the firm. So in this particular market firm, the efficiency can be achieved, the output can be efficiently achieved when the price is equal to the average revenue is equal to the marginal cost for the firm. And when this particular condition has been fulfilled, that means the supply and demand on the market will also be equal. It means, so whatever the goods are available in the market, the consumer is willing to pay if the resources are optimally allocated. And the resources are optimally allocated when there is no waste. That means when the price is equal to the marginal cost of all the last unit which has been produced to the individuals or to the consumers in the market. So when we talk about the efficiency in a perfectly competitive market farm, there is a one condition which has to be fulfilled to reach out the maximum output or to achieve the maximum satisfaction level of the consumers. That is, the price is equal to the average revenue and it's equal to the marginal cost. So when all the firms are available in the market, and there is another condition, that is, in this, if all are equal, then the demand and supply will also equal in the particular market. So this is a conceptual framework of the efficiency in a perfectly competitive market firm, and based on this condition, a particular graphical representation has to be done. So this is a graphical representation where we are talking about the efficiency in a perfectly competitive market firm. So if you look up the two diagrams where we are talking about the perfectly competitive firm and the perfectly competitive market. So as I told that there are two main conditions which states that the price is equal to the average revenue and the marginal cost. And ultimately, when we talk about when this condition is equal, then in the market, whatever the farms are available, where the demand and supply will also equal in case of perfectly competitive market. So let's have a explanation of this particular diagram. So in this particular figure, the long run equilibrium of a perfectly competitive market or output is achieved at a basic condition or a precondition to reach out the maximum level of output. That is, the price is equal to the average revenue, average cost at a minimum level, that is called the MIN, which is also equal to the marginal cost, is also equal to the average revenue, marginal revenue, and demand. So we can conclude that the perfectly competitive market in a long run, it produces the maximum output which can be achieved on this main condition in the perfectly competitive market where the average revenue is equal to the marginal cost. In the farm, it has been the two main cost has been drawn where the average cost has been U-shaped, and the when we talk about the marginal cost is going to be a more little lesser flatter which cuts the average cost at its minimum level where in this particular market the maximum level of output can be achieved if the average cost is minimum. So this is the main condition which has to be fulfilled and which has shown in the diagram and fulfilled as well, which produces where the firm produces the maximum output where the average revenue is equal to price is equal to marginal cost, and the market equilibrium can be achieved when there is no excess demand and supply. So if you look up the market situation in a perfect competition where the demand and supply has been equal at one point, which is the price has been in that particular equilibrium point is E, where the equilibrium price and the quantity has remains the fixed at that particular point. That means efficiency can be achieved or the maximum output can be achieved when both are intersect to each other and in respective of the perfectly competitive firm where the cost, marginal cost is equal to the average revenue is equal to the price. But under this particular graphical representation, there are two main types of efficiency which which has been used in the perfectly competitive market, that is the productive efficiency and the allocative efficiency. So when we talk about the productive efficiency, where the long run equilibrium for such perfectly competitive market, it's shown that the average revenue is equal to the average cost at minimum point where the firm being called a productively efficient, where the firm can allocate all its resources to reach out the maximum output at this particular condition, that is the average revenue is equal to the average cost at minimum point, which has been shown in the diagram where the average revenue curve, it touches at the minimum point, which is the average cost, and that exactly the intersection of the average cost and the average revenue is exactly comes under the productive efficiency, where the firm being called or productively efficient. When we talk about the allocative efficiency, you can see on the horizontal demand curve, which has been shown in the perfectly competitive market firm, which is also equal to the marginal revenue and average revenue, where the firms is not being where the firm is being forced to produce the maximum level of output, where the two main concept being equal, that is the price is equal to average revenues equal to marginal cost. And in this particular condition, when we talk about the allocative efficiency, the, the firm is actually called the allocatively efficient. When this condition has been fulfilled, automatically firm is allocative efficient. When average revenue is equal to the average cost at its minimum point, that means the firm is called productively efficient. So this is the conceptual framework where the efficiency is being considered and how it is being achieved in a perfectly competitive market firm, which always turn into the market where there is no excess demand exists, and demand and supply are both are equal intersect to each other at an equilibrium price P and the equilibrium quantity, that is Q, in a particular market. So this is the conceptual framework as well as the diagrammatic representation along with the explanation. Now we talk about the another concept, that is the efficiency. As I already told that efficiency is being represented in two parts, the perfectly competitive market firm, and now I am coming up to the efficiencies to be represented in a perfectly competitive market economy. So when we talk about us in a very simplified manner, where all the individuals are identical and engaged in a growing food. So this is a one of the you can see an example which has been considered to explain this concept, where in this particular competitive market where all the individuals are identical, are same, and are mainly engaged in the growing food. There is a main assumptions in the perfectly competitive market economy. The first assumption is the law of diminishing returns. So when we talk about the law of diminishing returns, that means any extra minutes of work which has been denoted by the farmers on a fixed land brings less and less extra food. Second assumption is that each extra unit of food consumed brings the less satisfaction level for that particular individuals. So these are the two main conditions. The first condition is whatever the extra minute is devoted on the fixed land, it brings less and less extra food. I haven't said the less food, it said brings less and less extra food. But the second condition, that means second assumption, is that any each extra unit of food, whatever consumed, it always brings the less satisfaction level, or the satisfaction level will go on will goes on diminishing, or in other words, I could say it's called a diminished marginal utility, where the satisfaction level goes on a declining rate if each extra unit of food consumed brings less satisfaction. So let's go through or using of these assumptions and this particular example, that is a growing food for the individuals or farmers. Let's you can say simplify or understand this concept using the graphical graphs or showing up a graphical representation of this particular concept. So this is a mean the efficiency in a competitive market where the marginal cost has been drawn, which begins from the y-axis, and the marginal utility, which always equals to demand curve and which always shown on the uh, downward sloping. So let's begin this. If you look up the particular diagram, it always shows that this particular graphical representation using a framework where the individuals are identical and you can see engaged in the growing food. And if we look up, the marginal cost is always an upward sloping, and the marginal utility, which is equal to demand, it's downward sloping. So the marginal cost curve we can call an industry supply curve, which always equal to the supply, which always where the marginal cost is equal to the supply curve. But when we talk about the demand curve is a horizontal summation of all the identical individual marginal utilities, or in other words, I could say the demand for food curves, which is actually shown the marginal utility and the demand curve of that particular growing food. The interaction of these two curves will reach out the equilibrium point, that is called point E, and at point E, the particular equilibrium, you can see the marginal utility and the marginal cost has been measured, and the OQ is the quantity has been measured. So at point E, the farmers are actually supplied the exact quantities of the foods where the consumer is actually willing to purchase at an equilibrium market price only, neither less or neither more. And each person will be working up to that particular critical point where the marginal cost is increasing and the demand is actually declining. So when and the particular all the farms or all the individual has to work out when the marginal cost is increasing and the marginal utility is goes on definition. So at point we can look at the you can say the vertical line at point F. So each person has to work out on this critical point at point F, where the declining marginal utility of consuming the particular food, particular you can say product, let's say the food which intersect at a rising marginal cost, which is equal to the supply curve. So this is the where the two main supply and demand curves will intersect each other, and which is always equal to the marginal cost and the marginal utility. And these two curves intersect at point T, which shows a declining marginal utility and increasing marginal cost of that growing food industry or the food curves, which ultimately denotes that there is a point when above the equilibrium level, the cost is increasingly at a frequent rate, and the not diminishing utility is you can say goes on in a very frequent rate. So when these two curves will have to where the all the firms has to have forced to work on this critical point, which turns into an F, and accordingly, it will, you can see, reach out the maximum output when these two curves will intersect each other. So this is a conceptual framework where the marginal utility is equal to the demand curve and the marginal cost is equal to the supply curve. So when these intersect, we reach out the equilibrium point where all the firms has to focus or has to you can see work on a critical points, that is point F, where the increasing marginal cost at of the food curves intersect to the declining satisfaction level of the individual. So this is all about the efficiency in a competitive market economy. Now we talk about in this particular concept, graphical representation, a new concept is called the economic surplus. So when we talk about the economic surplus, it refers to an area between the supply and demand curves at the equilibrium. So if you look up the areas where the lines has been drawn, that exactly called the economic surplus. You can look up the in the dark black lines, that is called the vertical lines, and that area, the area of the lines is actually called the economic surplus. So that is the new concept which has been derived from the efficiency in the perfectly competitive market economy, and that new concept is called economic surplus, which is the area between the supply and the demand curves at the equilibrium point. The economic surplus is actually the sum of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So when we talk, when you conceptually, we can talk about the economic surplus is actually a summation of the consumer surplus and producer surplus. So the consumer surplus is the area between the demand curve and the price line, and the producer surplus is the area between the price line and the supply curve. So if you look up, you get the consumer surplus. We always talk about that above the equilibrium point where we are talking about the consumer and the demand. Consumer, we are talking about the consumer demand. We're talking about the consumer satisfaction level, which is depends upon their demand. But when we talk about the producer surplus, we are actually talking about the area related to the cost of price, which is equals to the supply curve of the individual of the particular consumers or individuals. So this is the main difference, that in this particular diagram, a new concept has been tried, that is the economic surplus. And economic surplus is the area between the demand and supply. So when we talk about that new concept, economic surplus, which in other words, we can also, theoretically, we can also define that it is a summation of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So when we talk about the consumer, we will talk about the marginal utility and the price line and the demand curve. When we talk about the producer surplus, we talk about the price, cost, and the supply of that particular product by the consumers. So this is the exact theoretical framework where the producer surplus is the area between the price line and the supply curve. And the producer surplus is also include whatever the firm rents and profits involved, and the specialized inputs of the owners in that particular industry. And it also indicates whatever the excess of revenues over the cost of production. So the economic surplus is actually called the welfare economics or any of the revenue gain from the production and the consumption of a good. And of course it always in this particular economic surplus there are two main conditions which I already explained to reach out the maximum output or maximum amount of the output, that is the price is equal to the marginal utility and the price is equal to the marginal cost. So when we talk about the when we price is equal to the marginal utility, we talk about the consumer surplus. When we talk about the price is equal to the marginal cost, we talk about the supply of goods, that is supply of food. When we talk about the price is equal to marginal utility, we talk about the consumers choose those foods or purchase those goods where the price is equal to the marginal utility. That means every person who is buying or who is willing to buy a food is actually satisfied of buying the last unit of the food consumed until it reaches to a maximum level of satisfaction. And that is when we talk about in the figure we are explaining about the point E, which is an equilibrium point, and that equilibrium point, the two main condition is to be related. Condition is related to the marginal utility, and that's another condition is related to the marginal cost. So when we talk about the second condition, that is price is equal to the marginal cost, we are talking about the producer surplus. We are talking about the producers where and where the each person is supplying food up to a point of equilibrium point, that is E, where the price is equal to the marginal cost of last unit supplied, not consumed. I'm talking under this second condition is supplied. So whatever the price has been decided is exactly the depends upon the utilities or the leisure time which has been satisfied but actually lost while working on the or while working on gaining the last unit of food. So that is exactly called the second condition under producer surplus. So when we combine these two conditions, the main two condition to reach out the efficiency, to reach out the maximum level of output while combining these two main condition, equilibrium condition, that is called marginal utility is equal to the marginal cost. So whatever the you can see the consumers purchased of any last unit of food is exactly equal of the last units supplied or produced along with whatever the any extra time needed which almost lost in that particular condition. So it means that any marginal gain is always used for a society from a last unit of consumer, which always equal to the marginal cost to society of the last unit supplied or produced. So in this particular condition where the marginal utility is equal to the marginal cost, it always gives a guarantee that the competitive equilibrium, that means the equilibrium point, the perfectly competitive market is actually efficient. So when we talk about the efficiency in a perfectly competitive market economy where the two main conditions, that is price is equal to marginal utility and the price is equal to marginal cost, by combining these two equations, the main another equation, that is the marginal utility is equal to the marginal cost, it means this equation will always give a guarantee that the competitive equilibrium point is actually efficient in the market. So this is the exact concept of this particular diagram. And from this diagram, the economic surplus, consumer surplus, and producer surplus concept has been derived. And when using this concept, the two main equation which also been derived, which is always shown in the screen, which is P is equal to MU and MC. When both are equal, utility and marginal cost, that means the competitive equilibrium is actually efficient. So this is called the exact graphical representation using of these particular concepts. Now we talk about the competitive prices and the efficiency. That means we are talking about the first main theorem of the welfare economics. So how to explain the welfare economics? So there are exactly the one main concept is to be used to reach out the you can say to reach out the maximum output or to understand the theorem of welfare economics, that is called the marginal rate of technical substitution. So before I begin, you need to understand that in this particular concept, welfare economics, or the first theorem of welfare economics, there are two main exactly the concept involved. The first one is to attain or to achieve the Pareto efficient allocation of resources, where both the parties are better off, where the both the parties will get an advantage of any or between the any two goods, or you can say or any trade happen among the two goods, let's say X and Y. So to achieve the Pareto efficient or the Pareto efficiency, which are always refers to a trade-off between the any of the two goods, to have you can say same level of satisfaction. And in other words, I could say the marginal rate of technical substitution for all producer and the marginal rate of substitution for all consumers should be equal. So to reach out the maximum efficiency, there is also another condition where the MRTS is equal to the MRS. So where when we talk about the marginal rate of substitution, where the consumers is willing to give up to gain an addition or to exchange for another good. That means the consumer is willing to give up one good in exchange for another good, and that is called the marginal rate of substitution. So when we talk about the marginal rate of technical substitution, where it refers to the price of good X by a price of good Y. That means it is a price rate where all the agents will adjust the prices, will adjust the rates of the two goods or the more goods. And that is exactly called the marginal rate of technical substitution. And this concept is mainly used for profit maximizing decisions, where the all the trade-off rates, where whatever the trading has been occurred in the market, it has been done between the firms, it always been trade-off, it always been equalized at a rate of marginal rate of substitution in respect of two goods, that is X and Y, and which is always equal to the price X by price of Y. So it means to reach out or to understand the basically the theorem of the welfare economics is there is a one main condition to understand, that is the marginal rate of technical substitution refers to a price ratio of any of the two goods, let's say X and Y, which is always equal to the marginal rate of substitution of for all the consumers, which is also equal to the price of X by price of Y. And that is actually called the welfare economics. And that this equation stands or reveals the first or fundamental theorem of welfare economics, where all the agents, all the economic agents has to face the same price level in a perfectly competitive market, and whatever the trade rates uh, occurred or used in a particular market will all be equalized at this particular condition, that is called MRTS is equal to MRS is equal to price ratio, and this is called the first theorem of welfare economics, where the price is seen and how you trade off at this particular rate, and how it would be the better off or the trade-off between the producers and the consumers in that exact market is called the theory of or the theorem of welfare economics. This is a graphical representation that how this slope, that is the ratio of price of X by price of Y, has been shown through the graphical representation using up the PPC curve, using up the indifference curve along with the budget line. So let's begin with this, that whatever the optimization of two goods X and Y is exactly called the Pareto, you can say efficiency, or in other words we can all say the optimum Pareto optimal situation is also where the technical efficiencies or an allocative efficiencies always involved in it. So when the two goods are, when the combination of two goods are involved or technically efficient or using up an allocation of resources to achieve the maximum output, that is exactly called the Pareto optimal situation. When we talk about in this particular diagram, the equilibrium price, that is the price X which always equal to the price of Y, which leads to a Pareto efficient solution. In this particular concept, when we talk about the Pareto efficiency, the prices are always equal when we combine the two possible goods, let's say X and Y. So, and that why it is equal, because we have to make the combination of two goods are technically and allocatively efficient. That's why, and when it's efficient, then ultimately call the Pareto efficient solution. But when we talk about in this figure, the production possibility curve, that is PP, and along with the individual preferences is represented by the use of indifference curve, and it always shows in the particular diagram a combination of X and Y is actually represent the efficient output mix. So when we talk about any planned or a competitive market economy, the whatever the firms and individual will take decisions according to their self-interest, which actually relates to the allocation of resources. So when we talk about the slope of the marginal rate of technical substitution, which always denotes in a negative value as well as the positive value. So when we talk about the main slope, it refers to a negative value, which price of X by price of Y, which it means where the demand and supply are equal, and using the concept of equality of the particular equilibrium, and it always occurs as an optimum output or product mix. So this slope is actually refer to the marginal rate of technical substitution, which refers to a price of X by price of Y. This price mechanism is not only ensure that the production is technically efficient, but also ensure that the supply and demand of the product is actually efficient using the solution of the concept of you can say Pareto efficiency and the allocative efficiency. So when any combination of two goods using the concept of price ratio or to make up the technical efficient and allocative efficient, that actually called the theorem of the welfare economics, where the marginal rate of technical substitution is actually equal to the ratio price ratios of x and y, and when this is equal, that means automatically the condition is also has been fulfilled, where the marginal rate of technical substitution is also equal to the marginal rate of substitution. So where we talk about the marginal rate of technical substitution is for all the producer. So when we talk about the marginal rate of substitution, it's for all the consumers. When both are equal, that exactly called the first theorem of the welfare economics. So this is the graphical representation of this particular concept. Now we talk about what are those factors which influence the competitive market. So these are the four main factors. The first one is imperfect competition. So when we talk about imperfect competition, it refers to those situations where all the economic agents are involved and have some power over in the market to determine the price. So when they determine the price and they got us some power and to determine price in the market, and that in that particular situation, the demand curve for its product is downward sloping, and ultimately when it's downward sloping, that means or whatever the market prices has been decided by the particular economic agents that actually motivates to reach out the profit maximization situation where the marginal revenue will be more focused rather than the market price. So whatever the additional unit is being produced to reach out or to achieve the maximum revenue in this particular market. So this factor is also influence the competitive market. When we talk about imperfect, that means all the firms will have some power to determine the price. Actually, the price is being decided by the industry, but in this particular market, it is owned to determine the price, and that is the main reason it actually influences the competitive markets. Next concept is externalities. When we talk about externalities, it's actually fail. This factor is actually fail to how to allocate the resources efficiently when there is an interaction or with between the firms and individuals that actually not focused, that actually not reflected the exact market prices of the products. For example, a particular firm is polluting the air with industrial smoke and the other debris. Such situation is called the externality. An interaction between the interaction has been occurred between the farm level of production and the individual's welfare, but exactly not accounted by a price system, and that is called. And if such situation is not being, you can say, resolved, then ultimately it influences all of the competitive markets economy. So this is also the one of the factor that actually influence the competitive market. Next one is public goods. A similar problem in pricing because a particular firm has to decide the pricing of these goods. When we talk about the public goods, we talk about public education, books of the students, books of the kids, books of the schools. We talk about the medical health professions. We always help to provide the free services, and it is always unsuitable for the production in markets. So this is also, we talk about the pricing of the public goods. It also influence the competitive market as it is a free of cost for the welfare of the people. The next one is imperfect information. If there is no proper information, no full information is being disclosed to both producers and buyers in the market, and ultimately it influences the competitive market. And it is always being based on the assumptions that the buyers and sellers has the complete information to whatever the goods and services they buy and sell. If this information is imperfect, then ultimately it influences the competitive market. Now we talk about the meaning of externality. So when we talk about the externality is the cost, is the benefit that being caused by the one party, but the another party taking an advantage financially for of that benefit or for that producing that particular product. Externalities can be negative and positive. So when we talk about negative externality is an indirect imposition of a cost by one party to another. So when we talk about positive externalities, that means one party receive the benefits and the actions of the another party. That means some work has been done by another party and the benefit will goes to another party. So that is called the positive externality. And if something that is a cost imposed by one party to another, that is called the negative externality. So it depends upon the production and the consumption of goods and services only. That's all for today. This is all about the topics which has been taught today. I will come up with the most important or relevant topics related to the upcoming blogs and as well as the units. So till time, thank you for listening this lecture and namaste to all.